Hello and welcome to this special edition of CU Science Update. I'm Ina Damuri. In April 2010, the University of Colorado held its 62nd annual conference on world affairs. Well-renowned minds from all over the world attended to share provocative ideas about the world, its politics, its poetry, and its music. Among the thinkers who attended, we had the pleasure to interview 3 attendees who are regulars to the conference and experts in the fields of science and technology. We have decided to devote the next 3 CU Science Update episodes to these interviews. The first with a specialist in learning and memory. Dr. Kiki Sanford is a neurophysiologist, teacher, reporter, and blogger. She is also the founder and host of the popular This Week in Science, a weekly radio show and podcast that has been broadcasting for the last decade from the University of California, Davis. Dr. Kiki's research specialization is learning and memory in the bird brain. Very recently, she's been focusing her efforts on science communication and informal science education. A science journalist, Dr. Sanford hopes to keep people well informed about the latest events in the scientific world. She joins us in the studio with CU Science Update's Joey Maestas.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kiki Sanford, and today on Food Science, things are getting a little hot and spicy.
This contraption here is called a Rubens tube, and it involves fire, so how could I go wrong?
Because, you can get arrested for burning up this country's hard-earned cash.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kiki Sanford, and I'm reporting live from Macworld. This is my first interview of the week, and I'm so excited to be bringing all the science-based technology that's happening here, and there's a lot.
Chocoholic, chocolate addict. You might almost think that chocolate is some kind of terrible drug the way we talk about it, but it's just chocolate. Good, rich, delicious chocolate.
So I'd like to thank you, Dr. Kiki Sanford, for being on the show today for CU Science Update. Really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
First question I want to ask you, here at CU Science Update, we try to make science understandable and easy and fun for the CU campus, and I noticed that you have a lot of podcasts and a lot of shows, and you've done a lot of work to try to make that fun and understandable for the public. Can you go elaborate a little bit about your work and how you try to make that understandable for the public?
I think that there's a disconnect between the public and how they view science and what science actually is. And so it seems as though using fun and humor and entertainment in getting science information out to the public makes it more engaging and more palatable. And it's also more fun.
Yeah.
It just makes it more enjoyable. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right?
Right.
So my philosophy in the way that I approach any program that I'm doing, I take the science seriously, but I try and inject some amount of my own enjoyment and try and get, if I'm interviewing a scientist, I try and get them to get to the point where their excitement and their enjoyment of what they're doing comes across.
Okay.
Because you can always understand why somebody likes something if you can feel the enjoyment that they have. Yeah.
How many years have you been doing this, or at least going and having your own show with the podcast or the radio shows?
Mm-hmm.
And
10 years.
10 years.
So just over 10 years. Yeah, I started, I guess a bit before 99, 2000, doing This Week in Science. And that was started as a lark. A friend of mine and we would sit and drink beers and talk about science. I read this in New Scientist magazine, or what do you think about quantum dynamic, blah, 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 go off about all sorts of theoretical ideas.
Okay.
And one day we said, we should do this on the radio. People might like to listen to this.
Yeah.
And so then I contacted the UC Davis radio station public affairs director.
Okay.
And I'd been a DJ down at the radio station previously just playing music, but so I knew him a little bit, and I said, hey, I've got this idea. You don't have any science programming. What about this kind of a show where we present news and then we talk about it and give opinions and try and break it down to a human level?
Okay.
And he loved it. He gave us a trial period, and it now has been going for 10 years, and it was the spark that got me to realize that I really love communicating science, and that's what I just need to do. I need to try and get people to enjoy it and understand it. And it's kind of like art appreciation. Science appreciation has to come before science understanding.
Right.
So you just get people to appreciate it, and that's what I want to do.
Well, it seems like you've done a great job already from what I've seen with your podcasts already, but one of your podcasts I came across, Potential Energy, from about a year ago. A big issue right now is alternative energy. What are your views right now on alternative energy? And it's been a big thing with the Obama administration and the offshore drilling. Just kind of get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think alternative energy is someplace that we should be putting our money. That green doesn't just mean green ecologically, it means green financially as well. So alternative energy is one of the is the place that we should be investing in terms of economic resources. It's going to have it's going to be a boom for jobs. It's going to have so many positive reverberations throughout our society that to ignore it is at our own peril. Right. And if you just look around at some of the amazing ideas that people have that are coming there, I mean, we've got advances in solar technology that are coming through that, you know, Daniel Nocera is a researcher, a chemist who's creating home fuel cells powered by the sun. So you have solar cells on the top of your house that end up creating and powering a catalytic process that can then lead to the splitting of water into hydrogen. So you have a home hydrogen fuel cell that can then power everything you need in your own home. You know, these are developments that are coming through because people are focused on these ideas. And so the technology is there in many ways. I mean, it's going to be hard to develop the infrastructure to be able to meet the needs, and that's where the technology is coming in, the infrastructure needs to be developed, and then we'll be able to get to the point where it will actually be a positive solution to our problems.
Well, I'll hit on a couple points you said there. The economy, it's kind of down right now. So how is that affecting alternative energy and finding different ways and funding right now? How do you think that's affecting it?
It's affecting it negatively, very negatively, because it's kind of a privileged class's ability to have these alternatives. And so it is definitely, the money is not necessarily there as much. But I come from the San Francisco Bay Area, which is near Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is booming with green technology. Right. There are venture capital companies that are investing across the board in solar, wind, even nuclear power. And so there is money still there. There are investments being made in terms of being able to convince the populace that it's where the government should be putting money, that there should be government funding of any type of alternative energy. That's something else that's a bigger question that I think still needs to be figured out, and that's going to still pose some problems. But in terms of the private sector, things are still moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you talk about your friend, is it Daniel, a scientist that you met?
Daniel Nocera.
Okay. And he's been creating solar energy. What influential scientists have you met maybe through your shows or have heard about that you think are making a real change when it comes to alternative energy?
Wow. I'm trying to think. Daniel is one of the big ones.
Right.
In terms of, I'm trying to remember the name of, totally blanking.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm totally blanking. In terms of people though who are making strides and trying to push things forward. I mean, we still see people in NASA and in the National NOAA, the Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association. You know, there are people who are still sitting in the science of figuring out how things are working. And we even have our own government agencies where there are amazing scientists at government-funded labs, like the Northwest Pacific Laboratory, that are doing amazing work in terms of infrastructure development and management, in terms of nuclear, and also in terms of energy efficiency, so creating devices that are more energy efficient. So your washing machine will actually know when it's using the most power and maybe not allow itself to be turned on during certain times of the day. There are some neat things that are happening.
Okay. And then on your show, I saw that you did a couple different episodes. You did coal, I think you did hydro. Also, did you do one on nuclear?
I did.
Okay.
I did one on nuclear, and nuclear is a big question, whether or not that's going to really help us. It has the potential because it's so high, it's effective and efficient at energy production.
Okay.
Small amount of material in, lots of energy out, right?
Right.
But in terms of building nuclear plants, it takes a long time to build them, and they're really expensive. And so it's going to take longer than the time that we have to solve the problem, to actually build the nuclear plants, to actually get them online, to actually be a part of the solution for decreasing carbon emissions before 2050.
Okay.
You know, that's part of the problem, is they're so long-term in terms of the benefits that are reaped from them. The nuclear is still questionable as to whether or not it's going to help. A lot of other sources of energy are less energy dense, but we can get them online now.
Okay. Well, and you talk about nuclear and other different types of elements that come with that. Which part of alternative energy do you think could be most successful now or in the future? Would it be the coal? Would it be the nuclear? Hydro, solar, as you talked about before.
Yeah.
Which one are you more in favor of?
Well, I think, coming from California, coming from the West, there's a lot of sun.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's all locally dependent. So in the West, where there's sun, in the deserts, solar is the best thing, and is going to be the most successful. Along the Northwest, we have hydropower, so geohydrological power. That's going to stay that way. They have huge amounts of water, and the earth and geologic activity that's heating water that can be accessed for creating energy. That's good there. Wind in the plain states is huge. So it all depends on where you are, what's going to be the most beneficial. I mean, you don't want to put windmills someplace that there's no wind.
Yeah.
Then you could just say, oh, it doesn't work. Coal, I think, that's our biggest energy source currently in the United States. We have tons of coal. So the technologies that will make coal cleaner, that's beneficial, but in the end, coal in itself is a devastating energy source. And so I don't think that's something that we should hold on to for the long term. It'll keep us going as we implement the other alternative energy forms and actually get the infrastructure to make it work, but then we need to wean ourselves off of it.
Right. Okay. We actually, right outside Boulder here too, we have a big, huge wind farm also. And if you were going to talk to, let's say, a CU student, what can we do now, just even by living in the dorms or us in our everyday lives, to conserve energy and just in our everyday lives?
The biggest thing, turn off your lights. And one thing that people don't realize, a big concern as we move forward, here in Boulder probably not so much of a concern, you get lots of snow, you have lots of water, but the water energy nexus is going to be one of the even bigger than greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide emissions. Water is going to become a scarce, clean water is going to be a scarce product around the world. And so every time you turn on a light, you're actually using water. And so we're disconnected from that. We only think of ourselves as opening up the faucets to let the water out, or flushing the toilet, or taking a bath, whatever.
Right.
But you're using water every single time you're using energy. And so it's important to consider that, and to consider turning off a light, turning off the television, turning off your computer when you're not using it, leaving it in standby. It doesn't use that much, but it still does use power. So when you're not using your technology, you should be turning it off. Students probably don't use as much power as entire families. Riding bikes. Boulder's a big bike campus.
Big bike campus, yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Keep riding bikes. Yeah, it's things like that, and also buying locally so that you're not relying on products that are being trucked all across the country. It's good to be aware. Okay. Yeah.
And in California, what's the big issue there for as far as alternative energy? What are they pushing for in California? I know you were talking, I think, more solar
Yeah, there's a lot of solar in
Okay.
California and multiple forms of solar. So we've got giant solar thermal farms that are being implemented, and there are also some giant just solar panel arrays that are being built outside of Los Angeles and other areas. So solar is huge.
Yeah.
Solar is huge. Wind is also huge in California, but yeah, so I think those are the two places that California is really going right now.
Okay. And the final question I have to ask you, I've heard a rumor that you're a black belt in Taekwondo, or
Yes,
is that correct?
I am.
So we know not to mess with you if we see you on campus.
That's right. Don't mess with me.
All right. Dr. Kiki Sanford, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
It's been a great pleasure.
This was fun.
You can find out more about Dr. Kiki at kirsten.sanford.com, where you can also find links to Dr. Kiki's Science Hour on YouTube. That's it for this special edition of CU Science Update. See you next time.